My wife was holding a hotel receipt in one hand and my jacket in the other when I walked into the kitchen. She did not look angry at first. That would have been easier. She looked frightened. "Tell me who Rachel is." I stopped beside the table. "What, Rachel?" "I don't know a Rachel." Laura turned my jacket pocket inside out and dropped the receipt beside my coffee mug. The paper was creased twice and faded along one edge, but the hotel name was still clear. The Hawthorne Hotel, Riverton, room 614, one night. $286. My name was printed beneath it, Ethan Miller. I stared at the receipt longer than I should have. Riverton was almost 3 hours away by train. I've never been there. Laura gave a small laugh that contained no humor. "That's what you're going with." "I'm not going with anything. I'm telling you I've never stayed there." She unlocked her phone. That was when I realized the receipt was not the real problem. She had screenshots. The first message had been sent from my phone at 1:43 in the morning. "I can make this work. Don't let anyone talk you out of it." The reply came from a woman named Rachel Dane. "You barely know me," my answer appeared 40 seconds later. "I know enough." There were 11 more messages. Some were about meeting. Some were about money. One mentioned Riverton. The last one from Rachel said, "Ethan, you need to stop contacting me. I already told you I am not interested in whatever this is." Laura put the phone down. "You told me you were working late that week." "I was. You told me you barely left the office." "I didn't. You booked a hotel in another city and messaged a woman in the middle of the night." "I'm looking at the same thing you are. That isn't an answer. I don't know what answer you want." "The truth. I am telling you the truth." Her face changed when I said it. Until that moment, she had still been hoping I would confess to something ordinary. An affair. A stupid night. A lie. Something painful but understandable. Instead, I was standing in our kitchen, insisting that evidence carrying my name, my phone number, and my credit card had nothing to do with me. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a train ticket. I recognized my name again. Tuesday, the 8th of October. 7:10 a.m. Central Station to Riverton. Return ticket the following morning. I sat down. I remembered the 8th of October. At least I thought I did. It had been the week before my company's annual client conference. I had been working constantly, surviving on coffee, coming home late, talking too quickly about a proposal I was convinced would transform the department. I remembered Monday. I remembered Wednesday. Tuesday was strangely empty. Not black, not gone, just thin, like trying to remember a dream after breakfast. Laura watched me. "You took that train." "I must have." "You stayed at that hotel, I guess." "And Rachel?" "I don't know." She folded her arms. "Do you understand how insane that sounds?" I did. But what frightened me was that I was beginning to believe her version more than my own. I had been married to Laura for 9 years. We had a 7-year-old daughter named Sophie, a mortgage we complained about every month, a dog that hated thunderstorms, and an ordinary marriage built from thousands of ordinary habits. Laura knew how I took my coffee. I knew she always read the last page of a novel early and then pretended she had not. We argued about money sometimes. We got tired. We forgot anniversaries once. We had survived my father's death, Laura's difficult pregnancy, 2 job changes, and the year her mother lived with us after surgery. I had never cheated on her. I had never seriously wanted to. That was the one thing I felt certain about while sitting across from her that morning. But certainty had become a dangerous word. 3 weeks earlier, I had been certain I was about to change my life. At the time, everyone around me seemed impressed. I worked for a commercial property company called Harland & Beck. My job was ordinary enough. I managed corporate accounts, negotiated service contracts, and spent more time inside spreadsheets than any healthy person should. Then, in September, something shifted. I started waking before my alarm with ideas already running through my head. At first, it felt wonderful. I had spent most of the summer dragging myself through work. I had been tired, unmotivated, and embarrassed by how much effort simple tasks seemed to require. Then, suddenly the fog disappeared. I could see everything. At least that was how it felt. I reorganized 3 major client files in a weekend. I wrote a proposal for a new regional service division. I contacted people I had not spoken to in years. I began telling Laura that this was finally my moment. She was happy for me at first. So was my boss, Martin Hale. One Monday morning he called me into his office. "I don't know what got into you," he said, smiling, "but keep it." I remember that sentence because for the next 2 weeks I repeated it whenever Laura asked why I was sleeping so little. "Martin thinks I'm doing the best work of my career." That became my defense against everything. "Why are you answering emails at 3 in the morning?" "Martin thinks I'm doing the best work of my career." "Why did you order 2 new laptops?" "I need them for the business plan." "What business plan?" "The one Martin thinks could change the department." Martin had never actually said that. He had said my proposal was interesting. I had heard something bigger. Soon I stopped waiting for permission. I arranged meetings with senior clients. Martin had not authorized me to contact. I drafted a restructuring plan for the entire department. I sent 20 Gen 8 emails between midnight and Shanwu Sudan one Tuesday at work. People joked about my energy. Ethan Ardernian, my coworker Jason, called me. For several days I loved that name. Laura did not. The first real argument came over a dinner I had arranged without telling her. I invited 8 people to our house on a Thursday night because I had decided I wanted to start consulting independently. 4 of them were clients, 2 were former colleagues, 1 was a man I had met at a networking event. The last was someone named Adrian who arrived carrying architectural drawings. Laura pulled me aside while everyone was eating. "What is this?" "Networking." "In our house?" "Why not?" "Because Sophie has school tomorrow. Because you didn't ask me. Because I came home and found strangers drinking wine in the kitchen." "You're making it sound worse than it is. I don't even know what you're trying to do." "I already told you consulting. You have a job." "I might not for long." She stared at me. "What does that mean?" I smiled. That was the part I later hated remembering. I smiled like she was the slow one. "I'm bigger than that job now." A week later, Martin called me into his office again. This time he was not smiling. He closed the door. "Did you tell Northway Medical we were opening a Riverton office?" I remember laughing because I thought he was impressed. I mentioned expansion. "We have no Riverton office. Not yet. We have no plan for one. We should, Ethan." He pushed a printed email across the desk. It was from me to Northway Medical's procurement director. I had written that Harlan Faybeck was preparing to expand into Riverton, and that I would personally oversee negotiations. Martin pointed to the final paragraph. "You offered them a pricing guarantee. It's strategic. You do not have authority to do that. I'm trying to bring you a 12 million dollar account. You're promising rates we haven't approved. You're focusing on the wrong part." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he asked how much I'd been sleeping. I laughed again. "I remember that too." "Since when are you my doctor?" "I'm your boss." "Then act like it. Look at what I'm bringing you." He did not respond. I left the office convinced Martin was threatened by me. By lunch I had told Jason the same thing. By dinner I had told Laura. She asked whether it was possible Martin was simply angry because I had exceeded my authority. I accused her of taking his side. That night I slept on the sofa voluntarily because I wanted her to understand how disappointed I was in her. Years later, that sentence would still embarrass me. I thought I was punishing her. She thought I was unraveling. Neither of us understood how far things had already gone. The strange week began the next Monday. I know more about it now because I eventually reconstructed it using records. At the time I remembered it as 4 or 5 unusually productive days. The records told a different story. Monday, October 10. I arrived at the office as Shanwuliodan Shabafen security logs confirmed it. At Sidanin Sifan I emailed Martin a 40 page proposal. At Sidan Senshiyifan I emailed the company president directly. Something I had never done before. At Badan Shililfan I contacted a commercial real estate agent in Riverton. At Jodan Yarfan I opened a new personal credit card. At Shudan Sishuwufan I transferred Sitem Babamayuan from our joint savings account into checking. Laura would not notice the transfer until several days later. At Shardan Arshafan I bought an expensive presentation tablet. At Yaundan Shifan I paid a deposit to a graphic designer for branding. At Sidan Senshuwufan I sent a message to somebody named Rachel Dane. That was the first time her name appeared anywhere. When Laura and I later searched through everything, we discovered where I had found her. Rachel worked for a small business development firm in Riverton. She had posted an article online about converting unused industrial buildings into flexible office spaces. I had commented under the article, then I had sent her a direct message, then an email, then another message. Within 3 hours, I had convinced myself Rachel was exactly the person I needed to build my consulting company. There was only one problem. There was no consulting company. Not really. I had a name. Miller Strategic Development. I had purchased the domain. I had paid someone to design a logo. I had created a 10-page document describing services I had never provided. I had even printed business cards, but I still worked full-time for Harland & Beck. When Rachel politely replied that she could speak for 20 minutes by phone, I apparently decided a phone call was too small. I told her I would come to Riverton. She replied that it was unnecessary. I booked the train anyway. Tuesday morning I boarded it. That was the day missing from my memory. Later, when I finally saw security footage from Central Station, I watched myself walk through the concourse carrying a leather bag I had bought the night before. I looked normal. That disturbed me more than if I had looked wild. I was wearing a blue shirt and my gray coat. I bought coffee. I checked my phone. I stood politely behind another passenger. Nothing about the man in the recording suggested he would barely remember the next 24 hours. Rachel agreed to meet me at a cafe near her office because, as she later told Laura, she was worried I might simply appear at her workplace otherwise. That meeting lasted 36 minutes. Rachel described it months later. I talked almost the entire time. I told her I was preparing to leave Harland & Beck. I told her investors were interested. There were no investors. I told her I had access to several clients who would follow me. I had no right to make that claim. Then I offered Rachel a job. Operations director, salary, $120,000. She asked where the company was located. I told her I was negotiating office space. That part was technically true. I had arranged to tour 2 vacant commercial suites that afternoon. Rachel declined. I apparently interpreted the decline as hesitation rather than refusal. That explained the messages Laura found later. I know enough. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. I thought I was encouraging a future employee. Rachel thought she had met an unstable stranger who would not stop contacting her. I never touched her. I never propositioned her. I never had an affair. When Laura eventually learned that she was relieved for approximately 10 seconds. Then she asked a much more difficult question. If you could invent an entire company and offer a stranger a 6-figure job, what else did you do? That question became the center of our lives. The hotel receipt turned out to be almost trivial. I had booked the room because I had scheduled meetings with property agents the following morning. The larger problem was the lease proposal inside my email. At 9:18 Tuesday night, from room 614 of the Hawthorne Hotel, I had sent an electronic letter of intent to rent 3,200 square feet of office space in Riverton. The proposed lease was for 5 years. The annual commitment would have been more than $90,000. Thankfully, it was not yet legally binding, but I had also paid a $2,500 reservation deposit. I returned home Wednesday evening. Laura remembered that night much better than I did. She said I came through the door carrying shopping bags and talking faster than she could follow. I had bought Sophie a telescope. I had bought Laura a watch she had never asked for. I had bought myself 2 suits. I handed her a glossy brochure from the Riverton building. "We're moving." She thought I was joking. I was not. "What do you mean, moving, Riverton? Why would we move to Riverton? The opportunity is there." "What opportunity?" "My company." She said my company like the words hurt. I became angry, not screaming angry. That would have been easier for her to identify. I became cold, confident. I told her she had always claimed to support me, but apparently only supported versions of me she could control. That sentence stayed with her. Months later, she could still repeat it exactly. I barely remembered saying it. Thursday morning, Martin suspended me. Even that did not frighten me. I thought it confirmed my theory that he wanted to stop me before I became competition. He asked for my laptop and company access badge. I refused at first. Security was called. I handed everything over, but told Martin he would regret humiliating me. By lunchtime, I had decided the suspension was freedom. By 2 o'clock, I had sent messages to 3 Harland & Beck clients, telling them I was launching independently. By 4, the company's legal department had contacted me. By 6, Laura knew. She found me at the dining room table surrounded by papers. There were printed logos, financial projections, office photographs, a list of potential employees, and one document she had never seen before. A resignation letter. It was dated 2 days earlier. I had written it but never sent it. Laura held it up. Were you going to quit? I am going to quit. You were suspended today. For now, you could lose your job. I don't need the job. We need your job. No, you need security. We have a mortgage. I'll make more money, how? I pointed at the papers. She looked down at them, then she started crying. I remember being annoyed. That is difficult to admit. But it is true. I thought her fear was small-minded. I thought she was standing between me and something extraordinary. I did not understand that she was watching her husband make enormous life decisions at a speed she had never seen before. That night she called my older brother, Daniel. I discovered the call because Daniel arrived the following morning. I was furious. You brought him here. I asked him to talk to you. About what? Daniel looked exhausted. About what's happening? Nothing is happening. You tried to rent an office in another city. So, you offered someone a job. Laura showed you my messages. She's scared. She's spying on me. No one is spying on you. You've always done this. Done what? Treated me like I'm irresponsible. Daniel stared at me. Then he said something strange. This isn't the first time. The room went quiet. I thought he meant I had been ambitious before. What are you talking about? He looked at Laura. She shook her head slightly, as though asking him not to continue. That made me angrier. What aren't you telling me? Daniel sat down. When you were 24, after Mom died, you had a period where you barely slept. I knew the story. At least I thought I did. I had been grieving. I had quit a boring job. I had spent 3 months trying to start a photography business. It failed. Everyone made mistakes in their 20s. Daniel continued. You drove to Lakeside at 3 in the morning because you said you were meeting a magazine editor. I was. There was no meeting. He canceled. There was no editor, Ethan. I laughed. There was. What was his name? I opened my mouth. Nothing came. Daniel reached for his phone. I kept one of your old emails. I could not believe it, from 14 years ago. You sent it to me. He showed me. The subject line was, the biggest break of my life. The email was long, rambling, excited. I described a national photography contract. I described moving to Chicago. I described hiring Daniel to manage my finances. I wrote that everything had finally become clear. The language was familiar, not the details, the rhythm, the certainty. It sounded disturbingly like the emails I had sent during the previous week. I pushed the phone away. I was grieving. Maybe. You're trying to make something out of nothing. I'm trying to understand why the same thing seems to be happening again. It isn't. Daniel looked at Laura, then he said quietly, what happened after that period? I knew the answer. I hated him for asking. After the photography idea collapsed, I spent almost 4 months living in Daniel's spare bedroom. I stopped answering friends. I ignored bills. I lost weight. I slept constantly. At the time, everyone called it grief. So did I. Mom had died that year. It explained everything. Or so I believed. I stood up. This is ridiculous. I grabbed my keys. Laura blocked the doorway. Where are you going? Out, please don't drive. That sentence offended me more than anything else. You think I can't drive? I think you haven't slept properly in days. I slept? How long? I did not answer. The truth was I had slept around 3 hours in the previous 2 nights, but I did not feel tired. That was why everyone else seemed unreasonable. If I had felt exhausted, I might have understood their concern. Instead, I felt sharper than I ever had. I drove anyway. For the next 6 hours, Laura did not know where I was. Neither did Daniel. My phone battery died. I went to a shopping center, then a coffee shop. Then drove past 2 commercial properties I had researched. At some point I called Jason from a borrowed charger in the CA Cafe. he answered cautiously. Ethan, I know what Martin is doing. What? He wants my accounts. They're company accounts. You know what I mean. I really don't. He suspended me because he knows Northway would follow me. There was a pause. Ethan, Northway complained about you. I stopped walking. What? They contacted Martin. About what? You emailed their director 16 times. That's business. 2 of the emails were after midnight. So, you told him their current consultant was incompetent. He is. You copied his boss. I remembered none of that. Jason lowered his voice. People are worried about you. The words landed differently because Jason was not family. He had nothing to gain by controlling me. You sound like Laura. Maybe listen to Laura. I hung up. But I did not immediately dismiss him. For perhaps the first time, a crack appeared in my certainty. I opened my sent messages. There were hundreds, some I remember. One was to our company president. I had told him Martin lacked the vision to lead the department. Another was to a former client. I had promised him a 30% reduction in service costs through my new company.
Another was to an old college friend I had not spoken to in 5 years. I had asked him for $50,000. I kept scrolling. Then I found an email to Laura. It had been drafted but not sent. Subject, when you understand. The first sentence read, I am done asking permission to become who I am supposed to be. I sat down in the cafe. Around me, people were ordering lunch and talking quietly. For the first time in weeks, I felt afraid. I went home. Laura did not argue. She did not accuse me. She simply said, I think we need help. I still resisted, not because I thought everything was normal anymore. I knew something had gone wrong, but I believed it was exhaustion, stress, maybe some kind of breakdown, anything temporary, anything that did not change the story I had always told myself about who I was. Then the crash came. There was no dramatic switch. The energy simply began disappearing. Within days, getting out of bed felt difficult. The plans that had seemed brilliant looked humiliating. The business cards became unbearable to see. I shoved them into a kitchen drawer. I stopped opening emails. I avoided my phone because every notification might contain another consequence. Laura discovered the missing $4,800 transfer, then the $2,500 office deposit, then charges for the graphic designer, clothes, equipment, train travel, hotel, meals, and software. Altogether, I had spent $11,760 in less than 2 weeks. We could survive it, but not easily. The money had been intended for home repairs and Sophie's school expenses. Laura sat at the kitchen table with the statement spread between us. She did not scream. That was worse. I need access to everything. I nodded. Bank accounts, credit cards, email. If this happens again, I nodded again. And I need you to understand that I don't trust your judgment right now. That hurt, but she was right. The hotel receipt was still on the table. I picked it up. The woman wasn't. I know. I didn't cheat. I know. I looked at her. She had spoken to Rachel. That revelation made me angry for half a second, then embarrassed. Rachel had confirmed the meeting, no affair, no romantic relationship, no secret life in the way Laura had feared. But Rachel had also forwarded the messages I had sent. There were more than Laura had originally seen, 34 in 3 days. Most were not threatening. That almost made them worse. They were relentlessly confident, persuasive, personal. I kept treating Rachel's refusal as temporary confusion. In one message I wrote, "You will thank me when this becomes bigger than both of us." I covered my face. "I don't remember writing that," Laura replied quietly. "That's the part that scares me." The next week, I agreed to see a psychiatrist. I wish I could say I walked into the appointment ready for answers. I did not. I wanted someone to tell Laura and Daniel that I had experienced stress and sleep deprivation. I wanted a simple explanation that left the rest of my identity untouched. The psychiatrist, Dr. Patel, did not give me one. He asked about the previous month. then earlier years, then about the period after my mother died, then another time when I was 29, when I had suddenly decided to train for a marathon, invested thousands in a fitness business with a friend, slept 4 hours a night for weeks, and later abandoned both. I had forgotten how extreme that period had been. Laura had not. Dr. Patel asked about the months that followed. I told him I had been tired. Laura said I had barely functioned. Daniel later provided more history. There were patterns I had never put next to each other because each one had its own explanation. Grief, work pressure, a bad winter, relationship stress, excitement, ambition, burnout, different causes, different years, but similar shapes. The evaluation took time. There were questions about medical history, substances, medication, family history, sleep, energy, depression, decision making, and how long the changes lasted. The conclusion was not delivered like a dramatic revelation. It came quietly. Dr. Patel said the pattern was consistent with bipolar disorder. I remember staring at the carpet, then I said, "Number," not angrily, just automatically. He continued explaining. I barely heard him. The words bipolar disorder felt enormous. Too big for me, too loaded with things I thought I knew from movies, news stories, and careless jokes. I looked at Laura. She was crying. I thought she was crying because something terrible had been confirmed. Later, she told me she was crying because, for the first time, the previous month had an explanation that was not simply, Ethan stopped caring about us. That distinction mattered, not immediately, but eventually. The diagnosis did not erase the emails. It did not refund the money. It did not undo the promises. It did not automatically restore Laura's trust. And it definitely did not solve my job situation. Harland and Beck scheduled a meeting 3 weeks later. I had spent those weeks under psychiatric care, beginning treatment and trying to stabilize my routine while Laura temporarily managed most of our finances. I hated needing that. I also knew I needed it. The morning of the meeting, I found the resignation letter I had written during the episode. I almost threw it away. Instead, I put it in my bag. Martin was waiting with someone from Human Resources. I expected to be fired. Instead, they showed me a folder. Inside were printed copies of my emails, client complaints, security records, a formal warning, and a letter from Northway Medical stating that they did not want me involved with their account. Martin spoke first. You put us in a difficult position. I know you contacted clients while suspended. I know. You represented plans the company had never approved. I know. He looked irritated. Stop saying you know. I looked up, okay. Do you actually understand what happened? That was a harder question. I understand more than I did. I told them about the diagnosis. I did not give every detail. I did not use it as a defense. I explained that I had been experiencing a serious mental health episode and was now under treatment. Then I took out the resignation letter. I wrote this before you suspended me. Martin read it. His expression changed. The letter was arrogant. I described the company as too small for my ambitions. I accused leadership of lacking courage. I implied clients would follow me. I had signed it proudly. I don't expect this to excuse anything, I said. I brought it because I need you to understand that the person who sent those emails genuinely believed all of this. Martin set the letter down. And what do you believe now? That I damaged relationships you trusted me to manage. That was the first answer he seemed to accept. I kept my job barely. I was moved away from major client accounts for several months. I lost the promotion I had been expecting before the episode. I had to rebuild credibility slowly. Some coworkers became awkward around me after learning I had been ill. Most were simply cautious because they remembered what I had done. Jason eventually said something I appreciated more than immediate forgiveness. I'm glad you're getting help. I'm still mad. You dragged me into that Northway mess. Both could be true. That became one of the most important lessons of that year. Laura had the same position. Understanding did not instantly restore trust. For months, if I worked late twice in one week, she became watchful. If I became excited about an idea, she asked how much I had been sleeping. Sometimes those questions irritated me. Sometimes I heard accusation where she intended concern. We had to learn a new language around things that had once seemed ordinary. One night, almost 6 months after the Riverton trip, Laura placed the hotel receipt on the table again. I had forgotten she still had it. You kept that. I didn't know what to do with it. I looked at the faded paper for months. It had represented the moment our marriage almost broke. At first, Laura believed it proved I had cheated. Then we learned it proved something stranger, that I could make major decisions, travel to another city, and build an elaborate plan while understanding my own behavior completely differently from everyone around me. I hated you when I found this, she said. I waited for maybe 15 minutes. That's specific. I was counting. I smiled. She did too briefly. Then her face became serious. I thought the worst possible truth was that you had another woman. I know. I almost wish that had been it. That hurt, but I understood. An affair would have been a betrayal with familiar rules. This had been something neither of us knew how to name. She touched the receipt. I still don't know how much of that week was you. I thought about the question. There was no clean answer. It was my voice in those messages, my signature, my money, my decisions. But my judgment had changed in ways I had not recognized. I think it was all me, I said finally, just not me seeing things clearly. Laura nodded. That answer did not fix everything either, but it was closer to the truth than blaming a completely separate version of myself. I contacted Rachel once more, not directly. With Laura's agreement, I sent a short apology through email. I did not mention medication. I did not ask for forgiveness. I explained that I had been experiencing a serious mental health episode, that I understood my messages had crossed boundaries, and that I would not contact her again. She replied 2 days later, "Thank you for explaining. I wish you well. Please respect my request for no further contact." I did. That was the end of Rachel's part in my life. The Riverton deposit was partially refunded. The expensive tablet was sold. I returned one suit and kept the other because Laura said losing money purely as punishment did not make sense. The telescope stayed. Sophie loved it.
That felt strangely complicated. One of the best things I bought during the worst judgment of my adult life became something my daughter used every clear night that winter. Life refused to organize itself neatly into good and bad objects. A year later, I was helping Sophie carry the telescope into the backyard when Laura called me into the kitchen. The hotel receipt was sitting beside a pair of scissors. "What are you doing? I'm tired of finding this in the drawer." She looked at me. For a long time, I thought I needed to keep it. As evidence? Maybe. She cut the receipt in half, then again. Then dropped the pieces into the trash. I watched her. "That feels dramatic." "It's paper, Ethan." She closed the drawer. The business cards were still inside. I had forgotten them. Miller Strategic Development. My name printed beneath a title I had invented for myself. Founder and Managing Director. I took one out. For a moment I remembered how it had felt to hold those cards when they first arrived. Not embarrassment, not fear. Certainty. I had believed I was standing at the beginning of the most important chapter of my career. That memory still disturbed me because it had felt so convincing. I threw most of the cards away. I kept one, not because I was proud of it, because forgetting had caused enough problems. Today, Laura and I are still married. That sentence sounds simple. It was not. There were counseling sessions, arguments, financial rules, apologies, relapses in trust, medication adjustments with my doctor, and months when both of us wondered whether understanding what happened would ever be enough to live with what happened. My career recovered more slowly. Martin eventually returned 2 major accounts to me. I never became the regional visionary I had imagined during that strange October. I became something less dramatic and more useful. Reliable again. I still have ambitious ideas. Some are good, some are terrible. The difference now is that I no longer assume intensity proves importance. When I start feeling unusually certain that everyone else is moving too slowly, I pay attention. When Laura asks how I have been sleeping, I try to hear the question she is actually asking. And when I find myself remembering Riverton, I do not think first about the diagnosis. I think about a hotel room I barely remember, a woman I frightened without intending to, a wife who thought she had discovered an affair, a company I almost left, and a life I almost reorganized in a matter of days. For years I believed those strange periods in my past were separate mistakes, with separate explanations. The diagnosis did not rewrite my whole life. It simply showed me that some of the pages I had filed in different chapters had always belonged to the same story. I still keep one of those business cards in the back of my desk drawer, not as proof of the person I wanted to become, as proof that sometimes the most dangerous moment is not when you feel lost. Sometimes it is when you have never felt more certain of where you are going.